After an officer was gunned down at point-blank range, a psychotic killer led investigators across the Midwest. No one knew where the gunman would strike next, even as his tally of murders and abductions grew. The FBI and state police raced against time to rescue America's heartland from this deranged gunman.
A small town without any crime was turned inside out by the arrival of one dangerous stranger. Some killers are cold and calculating. Others are impulsive, unpredictable, and hard to pin down. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. To flush out this killer required a SWAT team and a profiler who determined he would not surrender without a fight.
At 8 a.m. on Monday morning, September 22nd, 1986, a U.S. parole officer made his way to the home of a parolee in a lower middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Indianapolis, Indiana. It was a routine visit scheduled a week earlier. U.S. probation officer Thomas Gall needed to get a urine sample from an ex-convict to check for illicit drugs. "40-year-old Michael Wayne Jackson had been released from federal prison 5 months earlier on weapons charges. He also had a history of substance abuse and severe paranoid schizophrenia. The parolee was reluctant to allow Gall to enter, but the officer insisted.
No!
Moments later, a neighbor heard shouting coming from Jackson's house. He saw the officer run out the door. Jackson followed him, firing a sawed-off shotgun into his back. The final shot was at point-blank range. The neighbor called police as he watched to see what Jackson might do next. He told the 911 operator that the ex-convict re-emerged, still carrying the shotgun. But now he was wearing a dark trench coat and heading for his green pickup truck. Indianapolis police raced to the killer's home, hoping to catch him before he got far. The neighbor added that Jackson also had on canvas sneakers and jeans as he watched Jackson leave the neighborhood. Jackson escaped before police could arrive. The police called in the FBI since the probation officer was a federal official. "39-year-old Thomas Gall had been killed instantly from the shot to his head." FBI Special Agent Jack Osborne of the Indianapolis field office was assigned the case.
When I arrived at the Jackson residence, the victim was still at that scene. We had dispatched numerous agents and numerous police were in the area. We were in the process of identifying any witness we had so that they could be spoken to by the police department and also by an agent.
The eyewitness who had called 911 described Jackson's behavior as having become increasingly erratic.
At what time did you see the offense?
The neighbor said he had seen Jackson outside more than once, talking to himself in a loud and agitated manner. Agents called the parole office to learn more about Jackson's background.
While he was in prison, The previous year, he had been diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic with antisocial personality and was to check in through the Indianapolis mental health facility and receive monthly medication for that illness, and they were afraid that he was not taking his medication.
Evidence technicians marked the positions of 3 12-gauge shotgun shells found close to the parole officer's body. Thomas Gall had been shot 3 times, the last one proving fatal. On the job for 11 years, the Vietnam veteran was the first federal parole officer killed in the line of duty. Thomas Gall left a young family and many friends.
I knew Tom pretty well. I knew his family, knew of his wife, knew that he had 2 kids, knew that he had been in the Marine Corps, had spent a year in Vietnam. We had talked about that a little bit. He was an extremely likable person, was extremely knowledgeable and caring, and it was hard working the case and keeping distance because of that closeness.
The inside of Jackson's house was described by officers as unfit for human habitation. Amongst the refuse, searchers discovered the shirt spattered with blood that Jackson wore at the time of the shooting and had since stripped off. Trash and animal droppings were scattered everywhere. There was no electricity or running water. On a counter in the kitchen, investigators found a hacksaw. They also discovered a sawed-off stock and barrel of a shotgun, likely from the murder weapon Jackson was presumably still carrying. As investigators were processing the house, an alert came across the police radio.
All right, we're on our way.
5 miles away, witnesses had reported another homicide. Just 20 minutes after the parole officer was shot, a second man had been killed at a convenience store by a shotgun blast, and a third man had been abducted. Agents interviewed a witness who described the shooter as having bushy hair, a beard, and wearing a dark trench coat. The woman added that the killer was wearing a bizarre disguise.
Witnesses at the JB Market indicate as a subject enters that market, he's carrying a shotgun, but he's got something on his face. The witnesses believe that it's grease and probably some spray paint that is in his hair and his beard, which really was a strange look.
Agents were convinced it was Jackson. The witness described that at 8:20 a.m., the armed man with a silver face burst inside demanding money.
Don't anybody move! You! Get the hell out! You! Get back! You! Get behind there! Get the money out! Get the money! Come on, hurry up!
Panicked, the owner struggled to open the register, but the gunman couldn't wait.
Hey, fat boy, get out of here!
Not wanting to leave empty-handed, the killer forced a bread delivery man to drive him from the scene in his bread truck. The witness didn't see which direction the bread truck was headed. Investigators revised the APB for Jackson to include the bread truck. Evidence technicians found a 12-gauge shell casing near the cash register, the same gauge and make as those found at the first murder scene. Buckshot from the victim was later removed to compare to samples removed from the probation officer. Detectives examined the pickup truck Jackson left behind. Inside, they found grease and a can of silver spray paint that was likely the source of Jackson's makeshift disguise.
We find that spray paint can in Jackson's truck, We're not sure why he sprays his face before he goes into the market after he had left his residence. We're surmising that he's trying to hide his identity, and he's doing that in this bizarre manner.
20 minutes later, agents received a call from the bread truck driver. Jackson had released him at the airport, unharmed. But the man told investigators the fugitive was still armed and on the move.
Jackson has taken another vehicle from the airport, again at gunpoint, and he drove up through the Speedway, Indiana area, had failed to pay for $10.50 worth of gas at a Speedway Sunoco station, and he was in a vehicle that is described to us, and there was a female in that vehicle.
Like the bread man, the woman was released shortly afterwards and called 911. But a second woman was not so lucky. At about 9 a.m., a young mother had returned to her suburban Indianapolis home following a shopping trip. As she unpacked her bags in the driveway, Michael Wayne Jackson emerged from a red pickup stolen at the airport.
Hey! Get over! Get over! Get in the car! Get in the car! Get!
She was Jackson's third hostage in less than an hour. Jackson held her captive for over 60 minutes, driving with a shotgun in his lap. She begged him to let her go, but he refused.
Shut your face!
There was no reasoning with the crazed fugitive.
She asked him about the disguise on his face, why his face was smeared with grease and oil and had paint on it, and he had no explanation for her, but did tell her that if she didn't comply with what he was telling her to do, that he would kill her.
The woman realized she had few options. When the car slowed, she jumped out. Jackson drove over her ankle, but she managed to roll free before she was injured further. The mother of one was treated at a local hospital for a broken ankle, where she reported the incident. She had escaped her kidnapper in Frankfort, Indiana, 40 miles northwest of Indianapolis. Once again, agents revised their APB. It now included her sedan, last seen traveling north from Frankfurt. Investigators struggled to predict Jackson's next move. They frantically gathered background information, trying to gain an edge.
Mike Jackson had a very extensive criminal background. In 1985 in Indianapolis, he was arrested and charged federally where he had homemade bomb devices in his vehicle and a homemade shotgun. For that, he received 1 year sentence in federal prison, and he was on 3 years parole for that violation during this time.
Jackson had also been in and out of mental institutions much of his life.
With some different looks.
Over the strong objections of his family, psychiatrists had recently released him from a treatment center since his schizophrenia had been stabilized by medication. But without supervision, Jackson had probably stopped taking his prescriptions.
Now, this was not really a picture.
And after 2 killings and 3 abductions in less than 2 hours, no one knew where Jackson was now.
We were in the process of sorting this out, as well as trying to notify all local state emergency people in the state of Indiana, as well as notifying other jurisdictions to help us try to locate Jackson. We knew what vehicle he last possessed in Frankfort, Indiana, and we hoped he was still in that vehicle and was not going to cause anyone else any harm anytime soon.
But authorities would be too late. At 10:15 a.m., Jackson decided he needed to change cars again. He barged into the Frankfort, Indiana home of a mother and child.
Don't move, kid! Get up!
Jackson ordered the woman to get her car keys or he would kill her and her son.
Get your purse. Get up, get up. Give me those keys.
She complied.
Give me those keys. Get, move. Move. Get your kid in the car.
In less than 2
Hurry
hours,
up!
Jackson had kidnapped his fourth and fifth victims.
Get in that car. Go, move.
The killer was becoming bolder and more aggressive. Agents had to somehow find a way to catch him before his latest victims wound up dead.
Get out of here.
By 10:30 a.m. on September 22nd, 1986, 40-year-old Michael Wayne Jackson had murdered his parole officer and a grocery store clerk, then carjacked 5 other people, all in less than 2.5 hours. The FBI and Indiana police believed the killer was traveling north from Indianapolis, but his exact whereabouts and destination remained unknown.
Now, hurry up.
Armed with a sawed-off shotgun and his face painted silver,
Move.
investigators believe Jackson was suffering from a psychotic episode after failing to take his medication.
Let's stay at work.
The fugitive was last seen in Frankfort, Indiana, where he had abducted a mother and child from their home.
Get out of the car.
No one knew what he might do next.
Get out of the car. Get over here. Get over here.
Jackson drove his latest victims to a desolate area 8 miles from their home.
Give me that ring.
He stole the woman's wedding rings, then ordered them to the side of the road.
Move it. Move it. Move it. Don't you go anywhere.
Though the woman and her child survived unharmed, it was 20 minutes to the nearest phone before she could report the killer's last known whereabouts. At the FBI office in Indianapolis, 3 hours after Jackson's crime spree had begun, Special Agent Jack Osborne issued a federal murder warrant for the fugitive. But with so little information on his exact location, it would be difficult to prevent Jackson from striking again.
Up northwest of Indianapolis at Frankfort. So that's our last spot. So we now had Jackson leaving or driving away from the Frankfort, Indiana area, but really had no idea where he was headed, how he was going to get there, what route he was going to take, or if he might grab somebody else in the next few hours. So this is our 5th location.
Since Jackson's pattern of travel and crime was so random, agents expanded the search and alerted all FBI field offices in a 750-mile radius, which included Cleveland, Chicago, and St. Louis.
Let all of our offices know if we can get something out statewide, too, to all law enforcement agencies, particularly along Interstate 65 maybe now.
They also contacted the fugitive's mother in Jackson, Mississippi, but she had no idea where her son might be headed.
Frankfort area.
Investigators kept the media informed, too. By noon, Michael Wayne Jackson's photo was on every news program in the Indianapolis area. 6 hours later, the fugitive surfaced close to St. Louis. He had traveled 300 miles southwest to nearby O'Fallon, Missouri. Local officers received reports from 2 residents who had been carjacked by a silver-faced man with a shotgun. A description of their car with Missouri plates was added to the list of stolen vehicles as Jackson's most recent.
It's about a 5-hour drive from Indianapolis to St. Louis. So in the early evening of Monday, the 22nd of September, local and state law enforcement in Missouri, after they had received our APBs, are notifying the police department and our office that they believed Jackson to be in that area because he had attempted a kidnapping and a vehicle theft of a couple different people in that area.
On a rural road later that afternoon, a third O'Fallon resident was on his way home from work when he spotted his wife's car with the suspect at the wheel. The man was unaware that Jackson had killed 2 others that same day. The silver-faced man with bushy hair and a beard refused to stop. As the cars approached an intersection, the killer drew his weapon. At 7 p.m. that evening, the man reported that the shooter only hit the front of his car. He'd returned home after the shooting to discover that his wife and father-in-law had been assaulted by the fugitive, but not seriously injured. Authorities now added the stolen blue sedan and its license plate to the APB for Jackson. It was the 7th vehicle carjacked in less than 12 hours.
We were glad to hear, I think, that we knew where he was. We were glad to hear that he hadn't harmed anyone else, and that we knew now that he had a different vehicle, and that the St. Louis authorities, both federal, local, and state, were in the process of trying to get him located and stopped without getting anyone else hurt.
Yet despite the all-points bulletin, Jackson was nowhere to be found. Missouri State Highway Patrol officers responded to an accident near I-70 in O'Fallon, close to where the fugitive was last seen. A car had careened into a tree. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene. Given the darkness of the night, officers could not determine the extent of the man's injuries. Suspicious of the circumstances, the man's family ordered an autopsy. The medical examiner determined that the man had been shot in the head at close range through the driver's window with a 12-gauge shotgun, the same type of weapon Jackson had used to kill his parole officer and a grocery store owner. Examiners sent the buckshot to the Indiana State Police lab so it could be compared to the others. It would take several days to learn the results. Area patrols stepped up surveillance in search of the armed fugitive. "10 miles away at around 7:30 p.m., a dark sedan with Texas plates pulled into a Wentzville, Missouri gas station. Jackson had carjacked his 8th vehicle and took its driver hostage. The attendant was unaware of the manhunt and didn't know what to make of the man with the silver face.
$10, please.
When the fugitive paid for the gas, the attendant noticed a shotgun in his lap and blood on his hands.
Thank you.
He immediately notified authorities, who once again changed the APB for Jackson. It now included the sedan with Texas plates. State and local officers rushed to the Wentzville area near Interstate 70. They needed to find the spree killer before he struck again. On September 22, 1986, the FBI continued to hunt for fugitive Michael Wayne Jackson, wanted for murdering 3 and carjacking 11 others in less than 12 hours. The silver-faced Jackson was last spotted at a Missouri gas station, armed with a sawed-off shotgun, driving a stolen dark sedan with Texas plates.
Thank you.
The passenger was the car's owner and was Jackson's latest hostage. It was impossible for authorities to know where Jackson might be headed, since his behavior had been so erratic after he stopped taking his antipsychotic medication. Wright City, Missouri police canvassed the interstate and local roads. At 9:15 p.m., Jackson was spotted alone in the stolen sedan by the town's police chief and his sergeant. Jackson seemed uncertain of what to do next. The chief radioed for reinforcements. They did not arrive in time. The sergeant was struck in the head. Jackson was long gone.
Yes, you all right? Sure.
The sergeant's injury was minor, so the chief gave chase, leaving him with a concerned witness. But the chief never caught up with the fugitive. 5 miles away, a pair of Missouri State Highway Patrol officers sighted the stolen sedan, abandoned on an interstate median. No one was inside, but the keys were still there. Officers then heard banging from within the trunk.
Cover me. Watch out.
They prepared for the worst.
Cover me there. Bill! Take it easy. Right there. Stay still. All right. Take it easy now.
They found only the terrified owner, traumatized but unhurt. His identification had been stolen, so police checked to be sure he was unarmed. He described his silver-faced kidnapper, armed with a sawed-off shotgun. He had no idea where the man had fled, but it appeared he had taken his gun since police did not find it in the car. The FBI and local police fanned out, not knowing which direction the fugitive had run, or if he had already carjacked his next victim. Despite hours of searching, they turned up no sign of the gunman, according to Special Agent in charge of the FBI in St. Louis, Hal Helteroff.
The night that Michael Wayne Jackson had abandoned his vehicle, we had the two sweeps on the south side of the interstate and the north side of the interstate the next morning. We were unable to flush him out of there. Then I determined that this was going to be a longer manhunt than I had expected. And at that point, I ordered in more FBI agents.
State and federal agents examined Jackson's last stolen vehicle. They noted the driver's side door had been pierced during the shootout with police. Since they did not find the slug, it appeared likely that Jackson had been hit in the ribs. The fact that Jackson fled the vehicle moments later could account for the lack of blood on the seat.
One theory was that he was injured and maybe went south of the interstate and laid down somewhere and either couldn't get up due to being injured or died.
A central command post was established in Wright City to coordinate the search efforts.
The vehicle that was taken there was recovered in O'Fallon, Missouri.
The area around the interstate encompassed thousands of acres of farmland and woods.
O'Fallon. Do you have a description on that car?
To contain it would require hundreds of personnel, vehicles, and 24-hour roadblocks. For Missouri State Patrol Sergeant Don Bizzelli, no one would be safe until Jackson was found.
You all have roadblocks? Okay.
Information that we obtained from the Bureau about the background on Jackson made us more concerned for the safety of the citizens in Wright City and for the safety of our officers. He hadn't hesitated to shoot before, and he had already killed a law enforcement officer, the probation officer, and there was nothing to let us to believe that he'd stop.
Great. Have some information you'll need on that.
Authorities established a perimeter around Wright City, extending 5 miles in every direction. Residents in the town of 1200 awoke to find their community saturated with law enforcement, searching for an armed and unstable killer. With a homicide rate of 0 and little criminal activity of any kind, citizens were frightened. They were forced to lock their doors for the first time, and many kept their children home from school.
We had to start alerting the community that we had a suspect in the area that was very dangerous, and asked the people to keep us informed if they saw anybody matching Jackson's description. And it didn't take long for the word to get around, of course, in that small community, because our greatest fear was that he would take someone hostage.
The sprawling countryside was divided into mile-wide sectors. Search teams consisted of bloodhounds, SWAT members, FBI agents, and state police. Photos were distributed to searchers, and samples of Jackson's clothing were provided to the dogs to learn the killer's scent. Hundreds of occupied and abandoned buildings dotted the landscape. All would have to be searched. Over the next several days, many locations were explored more than once. It was a tedious and time-consuming process. Bloodhounds, known for their large jowls and long ears which stir minute scents towards their perceptive noses, found few signs of Jackson. At one building, searchers came across an abandoned campsite. But it appeared the cookware and old raincoat had been left behind by an itinerant laborer during the harvest season. Despite a week of searching, the teams found no evidence of Jackson's whereabouts.
We tried not to get frustrated. We tried to keep the morale up, saying today's the day, we're going to find him. It's the type of case that your troops are out there and they expect any minute that they're going to get a sighting on him, so that in itself just keeps you going.
Media did their part to keep the public informed. While the FBI and State Highway Patrol maintained 24-hour checkpoints on the 27 miles of roadways into and out of the Wright City area, they stopped each car that came through. One of the men they stopped claimed to be the fugitive's nephew. He said he had heard about the search and he wanted to help. He told them his uncle could survive on his own in the woods, and that it was possible that Jackson could be wearing body armor since he owned some. This might explain how Jackson survived a policeman's bullet that had likely hit his ribs.
We determined that from the use of dogs, we had tracking dogs and we had cadaver dogs come in, that we could not come up with a dead body. Therefore, I was leaning toward the fact that he was still alive and well.
Area farmers tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, though remaining vigilant. A week into the manhunt, one woman spotted the bearded fugitive in his dark trench coat carrying a shotgun. She called police immediately, but the man disappeared before authorities arrived. 7 days after Michael Wayne Jackson had fled his Indiana home, the spree killer was still on the loose. The FBI knew that they had to find him before he found another victim. By September 28, 1986, a week had passed in the hunt for armed fugitive Michael Wayne Jackson, wanted for multiple murders, carjackings, and the wounding of a police officer. The 41-year-old criminal was last seen armed and on foot in the rural area of Wright City, Missouri. Despite a massive search, the FBI and local investigators had found no signs of the killer's whereabouts. The FBI considered the possibility that Jackson had stolen another car and somehow escaped the area. Desperate, they turned to FBI senior investigative profiler Ron Walker for help.
What they were simply asking for was my estimate, my prediction, I guess, of what he was going to do, what his continued acts were going to be, and where he was likely to go. And really more importantly for them at this period of time was, is he still in the area that they had been searching for 7 days?
Agent Walker analyzed Jackson's criminal and psychological history, as well as the reports from his current rampage. Since there were no new crimes recorded in the past week, the profiler concluded that Jackson had not yet left Wright City, Missouri.
Well, my opinion was that he was there, that he had probably become disoriented because of his paranoid kind of beliefs, his fear of being captured. He would avoid contact with people unless it would be to gain access to a vehicle to get out. And for that reason, I told him it was very important to maintain a very high profile, a high level of obvious police activity, because you don't want him to have the opportunity to think that he can get a way out by carjacking someone and getting a car and driving out of the area.
Since the fugitive was likely still in the area, the FBI called on the experience of tracker Bob Swabe from the Knoxville, Tennessee FBI field office. Swabe is best known for finding Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassin, James Earl Ray, after Ray's escape from a Tennessee prison in 1976. Agents hoped the renowned tracker could locate Jackson based on the minute signs he was trained to read.
Very seldom will you find a good footprint. You've got to learn to interpret the disturbance that's on the ground, and the little unusual thing like a leaf that is turned over or a stick that is just a small limb that has been stepped on and crushed or broken.
From decades of experience, Swabe can discern the difference between animal and human tracks through the depth of their imprint, the height at which branches or grass are disturbed around them, and their surface temperature. While animals often leave traces of their body heat after resting, humans' body heat is mostly absorbed by their clothing or shoes, preventing their heat from escaping. But since the hunt for Jackson had been so extensive, picking up his trail presented some unique challenges, even for the experienced tracker.
There had been so many people in there prior to us arriving on the scene. I mean, you know, that had I guess probably 200 or 300 police officers, law enforcement officers in this whole area searching before we ever arrived on the scene. So it made it more difficult.
Then, on September 29, 1986, a Wright City resident confirmed what the profiler had suspected. He reported that his guest house had been broken into. Nothing had been stolen, but he did find a broken mirror, used disposable razors, and an open can of soup. From the bathroom sink, evidence technicians recovered shaved hair, flecked with silver paint. It appeared that Jackson had once again changed his appearance. After 9 days of searching, agents feared Jackson may have slipped past patrols with his new appearance. Special Agent Jack Osborne took steps to alert the public at large.
Jackson was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list on October 1st, so we could get some national exposure. Manhunt in St. Louis and the Wright City area had continued for numerous days. There were sightings, but we still didn't know for sure where he was, and we thought that added publicity with him being such a dangerous person is what would help get him located if he had left that St. Louis Wright City area.
On October 2nd, investigators returned to a building they had searched a week earlier. Camping gear that searchers had previously noticed was still there, but one item was now missing: a blue raincoat. They wondered if it was Jackson's and whether he had returned to claim it now that the nights were getting colder.
I felt that he was probably going to look for some abandoned outbuilding to hide in, just get out of the weather. You're dealing with a guy here who's been on the run, no food or water that we know of to speak of, high strength of emotional and psychological anxiety and arousal. Physically, he would have been very, very debilitated, and mentally as well.
As the team approached a nearby barn they had searched before, a tracker noticed a muddy sneaker print leading inside. Jackson was last seen wearing sneakers. Searchers were not sure how old the print was, or even if it was Jackson's.
Got a feeling.
We knew that there had been SWAT teams there, and we didn't know really for sure whether that was his track or one of our own tracks. Part of the mud had dried up a little bit, part of it was still wet, indicating that it was probably maybe 8 hours old.
A single gunshot rang out from the hayloft. One team member escaped unharmed, but another was trapped below.
When the shotgun went off above my head, of course there was buckshot flying all over that barn. I don't think any of us got hit by it, but I looked to my left and I saw one of the trackers jump into a stable.
Without knowing the gunman's exact location, he couldn't make his way to the door without exposing himself as a target.
Yeah.
Since the tracker had no radio, searchers spoke to him through the walls.
Okay, good.
He confirmed he had not been hit and described the interior layout so the team could plan a rescue. There was no way out except through the front door.
I saw the outcome in the Jackson case as being a violent one. I saw this going to either a barricade situation with a shootout where he is ultimately killed by the police, possibly a suicide by police where he forces the police to shoot him. I felt completely confident that there would not be a peaceful resolution to this.
The tracker waited for help, trapped inside the barn, with an armed and demented gunman perched above him. On October 2nd, 1986, the FBI and Missouri State Police surrounded a barn in Wright City where a tracker was trapped by a gunman in the hayloft, believed to be murderer Michael Wayne Jackson. As a chopper surveilled the barn from above, SWAT members took positions around the perimeter. A sharpshooter provided cover fire, hoping to distract the gunman long enough for the tracker to escape through the front door. The tactic worked. Although the tracker had been inside for several hours following the single shotgun blast from the loft, he never saw nor heard the shooter after that. FBI Special Agent in Charge Hal Helterhoff was left with some tough decisions as he managed the standoff.
We didn't want to send in our troops if he had planned an ambush, if he had just shot as a decoy, if he was still in there alive and well, but still loaded with rounds of shotgun shells. We just didn't know what we had.
The barn's owner provided agents with a detailed sketch of the interior. The farmer explained that there was tractor storage and some stalls on the bottom floor, with a hayloft above. There was a window in the loft, but no other escape routes, no hidden trenches or trap doors through which the suspect might have slipped out.
This is all four here, and I got a whole bunch of hay over here.
Michael Wayne Jackson. We know
Agents
you're in
attempted
there.
to make
Put your
contact with the
weapon down,
fugitive.
Come out, your hands on your head, and you will not be hurt.
They received no answer.
I repeat.
And after working so hard all those days, we didn't want to make an incorrect move and have one of our agents or officers or troopers injured at the last minute when it was unnecessary. So it was a very, very disciplined, well-organized effort.
The special agent in charge hoped tear gas would flush the shooter out. They fired non-flammable tear gas canisters into the loft. There was still no movement.
It's so dark, and we were trying to determine Should we have our tactical move, our assault? Should we wait till the next morning or wait till dawn where it's daylight? Again, we went 11 days. What's a few more hours when we know whoever's in there is trapped? And we had weather advisement that a violent storm was going to be moving in around midnight. So the state police and I decided, let's go now.
Equipped with night vision goggles, SWAT members navigated the dark, shadowy space. A pair of agents provided cover while their partners searched the lower level. They found no one on the first floor. They had no way to know if the killer was lying in wait, or if he was still there at all.
Hey guys, I got a body over here.
They had their answer soon enough. Lying amongst the hay bales, they found a man holding a shotgun who appeared to be Jackson.
Is it him?
He was dead, killed by the single shot he had fired hours earlier into his own head. Agents needed to confirm his identity.
They said, let's take his fingerprints, and we had an FBI agent, expert fingerprint examiner, on the scene with the known prints of Michael Wayne Jackson. And he took his fingerprints, and then we waited while he did his assessment, and finally he announced that it's definitely a match. It's Michael Wayne Jackson. And at that point, we were all relieved.
They found no body armor on the killer. But as the FBI profiler had predicted, Michael Wayne Jackson chose to die rather than give himself up. 11 days after Michael Wayne Jackson killed his parole officer and began his crime spree, the town of Wright City, Missouri was able to feel safe again. It could have ended much worse, according to Missouri State Patrol Sergeant Don Bizzelli.
I was relieved for the people that no one else was going to get hurt. That was my main concern. No one else in that community would have to worry about Michael Wayne Jackson anymore.
Through the sacrifice of Thomas Gall, probation officers now have the option of carrying protective sidearms. FBI Special Agent Jack Osborne was close to Gall and his family and continues to mourn the loss.
As a law enforcement officer, I think a little bit of you dies when people close to you suffer. Tom was close to me personally. Tom was a friend. He was not only a friend to me personally, but he was a friend to our office. Our office knew him, and we worked very closely with him in the Federal Probation Parole Office.
For giving up his life in the line of duty, the Indianapolis U.S. Probation Office was renamed in Thomas Gall's memory. It enabled his friends and colleagues to express in a more permanent way Gall's significant contributions, his exemplary character, and the agency's deep and lasting affection for him. Deep in the hills of Arkansas, an army of extremists plot to overturn the U.S. government. They spread a doctrine of hate, murder, and genocide. Launch death raids on churches and synagogues, bomb public utilities, and gun down a state trooper. Federal agents must dismantle the radical renegades without inciting a bloody war.
In 1984, a tragic murder led agents into the frightening world of domestic terrorism. Law enforcement vowed to dismantle the violent faction that claimed responsibility. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The radical group pursued a doctrine of racial cleansing, an attack on basic American freedoms. The FBI's quest for justice escalated into a brutal showdown, pitting agents against terrorists, fueled by hate.
June 1984. Sevier County, Arkansas. A rural area along the Oklahoma border. Winona Bryant drives south on U.S. Highway 71. Winona is a teacher at a local high school. She's traveling with her children and her nephew to meet her husband for lunch. He is Lewis Bryant, an Arkansas state trooper. He patrols this stretch of highway. Along the way, Winona spots a police cruiser on the side of the road. She recognizes the ID number.
That's Dad's car.
Lewis is nowhere in sight. Something's wrong. Winona tells the children to stay in the car.
Stay in the car.
Then she sees him. Covered with blood.
Lewis? 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 Oh my God, Lewis! Oh God!
Winona struggles to stay calm as she uses the police radio to call for help.
Officer down! Officer down! Please, somebody! Officer down! Somebody!
She tells the dispatcher that Lewis is unconscious. It looks like he's been shot.
Just get somebody here! He's been shot! Please!
The Arkansas State Police dispatcher alerts all police frequencies that an officer is down.
Interstate 71 North. 2 miles north.
Passing motorists stop to help. Winona can feel a faint heartbeat, but her husband isn't breathing. She administers CPR until county authorities arrive. Paramedics rush Bryant to a nearby hospital, where he is pronounced dead. Trooper Lewis Bryant was a respected veteran of the Arkansas State Police. He leaves behind his wife, Winona, and their 2 children. Within minutes of the shooting, the DeQueen, Arkansas Sheriff's Department receives a frantic call. A driver on Highway 71 reports seeing a brown and white van leaving the scene. It was pulling a homemade trailer. Police in Broken Bow, Oklahoma spot the van heading west. The driver refuses to stop, but police force him to the side of the road. As officers converge on the van, the driver pulls out a rifle and starts shooting. Police strike the suspect in the shoulder. He pulls out a .45 caliber pistol and continues firing. Officers hit him 4 more times, finally forcing him down.
Hands! See your hands! Go over on your belly!
Police search the wounded suspect and find a driver's license identifying him as Richard Wayne Snell of Stephenville, Texas. At a nearby hospital, police question Snell. The suspect confesses to shooting the state trooper. Snell tells police he has outstanding warrants in Texas and he was trying to escape arrest. As Bryant approached the car, Snell opened fire. Agents from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation search Snell's van. They discover a metal box containing a .22 semi-automatic pistol and a grenade. They also find suspicious wires attached to the underside of the steering wheel column, leading to the air conditioner vent.
We got wires going into the
They fear the van is booby-trapped. Investigators call in a bomb squad from the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Technicians carefully examine the vehicle. After several tense moments, they conclude the van is not rigged to explode. The search of the vehicle resumes. Investigators find several more weapons, including a MAC-10 machine pistol. They also find literature printed by a group of white supremacists called the CSA, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord.
You're labeling them all the same. So that
The group advocates the violent overthrow of the United States government. In their literature, they call for the murder of government agents and the extermination of Jews and blacks. Police call in Agent Bill Buford of the ATF. Along with other federal investigators, Buford has been trying to establish a criminal case against the CSA for nearly 2 years. Looking for evidence, Buford makes a chilling discovery.
In the van was a briefcase. And in the briefcase was a lot of notes that this individual had put together, different maps. And one of the things that I noticed immediately was a map apparently of my house. The street it was on, the different houses that surrounded my place. And that caused me a little consternation, to say the least. It was later established that they had also been doing surveillance on a federal judge, a U.S. attorney, an FBI agent. For whatever reason, whether they just wanted to know where we lived or whether they were anticipating retaliation for whatever, that's just left up to one's own imagination, I guess.
Buford examines the weapons retrieved from the van.
One of the things that came to my attention almost immediately was that the MAC-10 had a silencer on it.
The silencer is homemade but sophisticated. Bill Buford believes he has seen one just like it, confiscated just 3 months earlier. In early April, Missouri police caught 3 men stealing a flatbed trailer. In their possession were 3 .45 semi-automatic pistols, 1 sawed-off shotgun, and 1 MAC-10 converted to fully automatic with a homemade silencer. According to an informant, all 3 men are members of the CSA.
The 2 silencers looked exactly the same. And I felt like this might be a break if we could determine that these 2 silencers were made by the same people and were able to establish that they had come from the CSA compound.
5 days after the shooting, on July 5th, 1984, Trooper Lewis Bryant is laid to rest. The funeral is attended by then-Governor Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and over 1,000 police officers. Governor Clinton makes the investigation of extremist groups a priority.
Is to set up a group comprising members of both districts under the chairmanship of Colonel Goodwin to work on these cases.
State and federal agents probe deeper into Snell's connection to the CSA. The murder weapon in the Bryant case was a .45 caliber Colt Commander. 18 months earlier, the gun had been stolen in a deadly pawn shop holdup in Texarkana, Arkansas. The owner had been shot 3 times in the back of the head. Ballistics analysis shows a bullet recovered from the victim had been fired by a .22 caliber Ruger, the same .22 Ruger found in Snell's van. According to records, the leader of the CSA purchased that Ruger 4 years earlier. Agents now have enough evidence to subpoena the leader of the CSA to appear before a federal grand jury on gun charges. Bill Buford heads to Mountain Home, Arkansas to deliver the subpoena to the CSA leader at his 200-acre compound. Informants and surveillance indicate that the compound is heavily fortified. Several structures dot the surveillance photos. Agents know the compound is inhabited by the CSA leadership and approximately 65 men, women, and children. They know little else.
Sentries out, about in front of it, stop us, do our check-in.
ATF investigators had become aware of the CSA several years earlier. The organization had evolved from a religious group into a violent right-wing militia.
When ATF began to really think that this was more than just a Bible study group was when we were aware of the large number of right-wing organizations that were coming in and doing the paramilitary training there.
About another 150 yards up.
According to informants, extremist groups such as the Aryan Nation, the Posse Comitatus, and the Order frequently visited the compound.
They're watching us tight, so...
A few low-level members of the CSA had been arrested for firearms violations. But the leadership of the group had always managed to evade prosecution for all but misdemeanor offenses. Buford hoped today would mark the beginning of the end for this dangerous organization. Agent Buford meets a man at the front gate who identifies himself as Kerry Noble, the group's second in command.
He went into the compound, and a short time later he came back and said, well, the leader of the group will meet with you, but only you, and you have to go down unarmed, and I have to search you to make sure you haven't got a gun on you.
Buford agrees to turn his weapon over to another ATF agent. He allows himself to be searched. He knows that going into the compound alone and unarmed is dangerous, but there's no other choice.
If one of the people that was working for me or one of the agents under my supervision had wanted to do it, I wouldn't have let him do it. But at the time, it seemed like the right thing.
The stakes are too high. The group is too dangerous. Buford needs to show the CSA that federal agents will not be intimidated. In Arkansas, State Trooper Lewis Bryant is gunned down during a routine traffic stop. Investigators discover weapons connecting Bryant's killer to a group of violent white supremacists calling themselves the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord.
Oh, we got a grenade. Got another hand.
ATF agent Bill Buford enters the group's heavily fortified compound to deliver a subpoena, ordering the group's leader to appear before a federal grand jury. The ATF agent enters alone and unarmed.
It was kind of an awesome sight. At first glance, it looked like just a community there with a number of buildings. But as you looked closer, you saw that these buildings were all rock structures. very well made. If you looked closely, you could see that there were bunkers dug around the compound itself.
Buford confronts the CSA leader face to face.
I got a subpoena in my jacket.
I explained to him that I had a subpoena from a federal grand jury in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and that he would need to appear on the date on the subpoena.
The subpoena concerns weapons involved in the murder of a state trooper. Investigators have traced some of the weapons back to the CSA.
No, I'm not under arrest.
He asked if he would be arrested. I assured him that a grand jury appearance was all this was. That was not an arrest warrant, that he wouldn't be arrested.
The leader takes the subpoena.
Okay.
His men escort Buford out of the compound. When the CSA leader eventually appears before the grand jury, he denies knowing Richard Wayne Snell, the man who confessed to the murder of Trooper Lewis Bryant. He also claims no knowledge of how weapons traced to him ended up in Snell's possession. On November 1st, 1984, Richard Wayne Snell is found guilty of capital murder in the shooting death of State Trooper Lewis Bryant. He is sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On the same day, Snell is charged with the murder of a pawn shop owner in Texarkana, Arkansas. In the winter of 1985, the FBI, the ATF, and the Arkansas U.S. Attorney's Office turn up the heat on the CSA. FBI Special Agent Jack Knox has developed a key informant who claims the CSA is involved in acts of domestic terrorism.
He outlined what he referred to as road trips in which he and 2 other members of the CSA were assigned by the leader of the CSA to take in search of businesses or establishments to plunder, or Jewish establishments which they might attack.
According to the informant, 2 years before the murder of the Arkansas State Trooper, several CSA members had set fire to a Jewish community center in Bloomington, Indiana. The informant claimed that at about the same time, the CSA firebombed a church in Springfield, Missouri that welcomed gay members. He also claimed that 3 months later, the CSA attempted to bomb a major natural gas pipeline in Fulton, Arkansas, to disrupt supplies across the Midwest. They were unsuccessful. The pipeline was not damaged. But Assistant U.S. Attorney Steve Snyder could see a dangerous pattern emerging.
There were what appeared to be random acts of violence. But after this individual talked, they no longer became random acts of violence. They became part of a plan to strike out against the United States and attempt to disrupt the activities of the United States and its citizens.
The CSA had evolved from a religious cult into a group of domestic terrorists that had declared war on the United States. In March 1985, a second informant, a former member of the CSA, provides more information about the organization. He gives details about firearms and explosives being manufactured and used by the group. He tells investigators there is a machine shop in the compound where the CSA makes grenades and silencers and illegally converts semi-automatic weapons to fully automatic. He also claims the group has obtained a powerful anti-tank rocket, commonly called a law. The FBI informant reports that the CSA is building an armored tank and that landmines have been placed around the perimeter of the compound. He also provides a laundry list of interstate offenses committed by the group, including transportation of stolen vehicles, mail fraud, and theft of government property. Based on the informant's statements, the U.S. Attorney pursues a warrant to search the CSA compound for illegal weapons and explosives. Assistant U.S. Attorney Snyder intends to use RICO, a federal racketeering statute, to prosecute the CSA. The statute enables authorities to arrest and convict leaders of criminal organizations based on a pattern of illegal activities.
The RICO statute carried a statutory maximum penalty of 20 years, as opposed to the weapons and firearms violations, which carried a lesser penalty. So it was a more severe crime.
If I can show you this bigger map, maybe
Investigators discuss how to best serve the warrant.
Again, this is the compound.
Bill Buford opposes a kick-in-the-door approach.
It was obvious to me that we were dealing with a very militant organization. They were not, in fact, going to just roll over. If we walked in and say, hey, we're the federal government, we're here to look at your compound, they weren't going to allow us to do that.
To reduce the risk of a violent battle, the FBI would employ the newly formed hostage rescue team to serve the warrants. The HRT was established in 1982 as a counter-terrorism unit to work both inside and outside the borders of the United States. In 1985, Special Agent Danny Colson is the commander of the HRT.
The HRT basically are assaulters. It's their job to go into a crisis point and neutralize terrorists and rescue hostages. But this was not that type of situation. These people were very well armed, they were very formidable, and we wanted to avoid a shootout.
Colson establishes a command post in nearby Branson, Missouri. The HRT is composed of 2 elite teams.
Basically, you had a sniper element and you had an operator element. The snipers were responsible for gathering intelligence to give cover to the operators, and the bulk of the team was made up of operators.
Agent Buford, who has been inside the compound, briefs Colson on the layout, the main gravel access road, the front gate, and where the property borders the shore of a man-made lake.
Now, this gate's gonna be very heavily
The first phase of the operation is a reconnaissance mission.
You cannot command and control a crisis situation unless the commander's done a recon. He has to go in and see the ground. He has to know what the structures are like, where they are relative to each other, and what the best avenue of approach to get there in the shortest period of time is.
Tonight, Colson and his team will be the uninvited guests of the CSA. In Arkansas, local and federal authorities believe an extremist group is involved in domestic terrorism. They call themselves the CSA, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord. The FBI's hostage rescue team prepares to enter the terrorists' heavily fortified compound.
Where the compound is or anything else, last chance.
HRT Commander Danny Colson briefs the reconnaissance team before they go in. The recon team's job is to gather intelligence on the group's infrastructure, its buildings, manpower, and weapons, while avoiding the CSA's armed patrols. ATF agent Bill Buford will act as the HRT's guide. He's been inside the compound and knows the layout.
I had been doing so much work on the CSA and had spent so much time in the woods out around the compound that I had a good idea of the terrain, the fortifications on the compound, and had drawn up a raid plan myself as to what I felt should be done in order to execute this safely.
FBI Special Agent Danny Colson knows the CSA is well armed and dangerous.
These individuals had assault rifles, they had night vision capability, they had an excellent communication system, they were well trained, they practiced their tradecraft, which means marksmanship.
Still, Colson has every faith in his team.
The HRT has excellent patrolling skills, and it was just a matter of relying on our training. You move very quietly, you move very slowly, you crawl on your stomach, you stop and you listen, you look, and you rely on your senses. We would send a person on point. He would scour the area and glass it with thermal imaging gear. You listen to the noise of the forest. If something interrupts that, you know that somebody's there that's not supposed to be.
The team spots CSA guards patrolling the compound. They're armed with assault rifles.
We finally signaled it was safe, and we moved the rest of the patrol in. And we sort of leapfrogged in and out. We had a rear guard to be sure that nobody came around behind us. The thing I was concerned most about, of course, is the law rocket. You don't have to be a real good shot with a law rocket to kill a lot of people. It'll take out a light tank or a bunker, fired into my perimeter, could have killed my agents.
The recon team finally makes its way to the main compound. CSA members, as well as their families, are asleep inside some of the buildings.
The assault team leader needed to know what the structures looked like in case we had to breach them. So you have the possibility that there could be a suicide pact with these people. They might start killing their children. That's happened before, it's happened since then. And so we had to be prepared to go in there to rush in and save innocent lives.
From the reconnaissance missions, Colson now knows exactly how the CSA compound is laid out and what needs to be done.
Well, the thing that the recon really reinforced was that we don't want to assault these guys. I mean, if we had to, we could do it, but there would be great loss of life on their side and possible on our side.
The compound sits on over 200 acres of land. If Colson hopes to resolve this without bloodshed, he'll need a lot more men.
After we saw how expansive this facility was there, I knew 50 men could not hold that perimeter.
Colson calls for an additional 200 FBI agents from field offices across the country. He needs to sneak them into the small community without tipping off the CSA. Knowing Mountain Home, Arkansas is famous for its sports fishing, FBI agents disguise themselves as fishermen. They check into fishing camps located along the river. The plan is to use fishing boats to approach the compound at its weakest point, from the lake. As agents prepare to move on the compound, Colson briefs Special Agent Clint Van Zandt of the FBI's hostage negotiation unit.
You've got about 5 options in any type of situation. You can contain, isolate, and negotiate. You can contain and demand surrender. You can use snipers, you can use tear gas, or you can use a direct tactical assault and just overwhelm them with manpower and firepower. In these last 3, people die.
The decision is made to contain, isolate, and negotiate. Danny Colson is the point man on all 3 phases of the operation.
This man views himself.
I came to believe rather quickly that the leader of CSA is not going to want to negotiate with a lower-ranking FBI negotiator, he's going to want to talk to his tactical equivalent. In this case, it's going to be Danny Coulson.
And I wasn't comfortable with that. I'm a tactical person. I had been a sniper, and I'd been a SWAT team member and a SWAT team leader and trained as an operator. And I was not trained to be a negotiator. And I didn't know that I could pull that off. I'm much more comfortable going in after the guy than trying to talk him out.
But Van Zandt convinces Coulson that he's the right man for the job.
I had viewed a lot of negotiations. I mean, every time a tactical team is deployed, a negotiator is deployed with them, so I'd seen it done. And basically, Clint Van Zandt taught me some negotiation strategies and techniques.
After 10 days of reconnaissance and planning, Special Agent Danny Coulson and the FBI hostage rescue team are ready. Over 200 law enforcement agents prepare to surround one of the most dangerous and heavily armed outlaw militias in the country. In 1985, the FBI closes in on the CSA, a paramilitary organization in Arkansas. Members of the group are suspected of domestic terrorism and murder. Over 200 agents, led by the FBI's hostage rescue team, make their move. HRT snipers and operatives deploy across a lake that borders the compound. Their mission is to establish a rear perimeter. Additional HRT units fan out in the woods, flanking the main compound. The ATF, along with the Arkansas State Police and the Missouri Highway Patrol, set up roadblocks. Their job is to prevent any CSA supporters from entering or leaving the compound. Overhead, an FBI surveillance aircraft called the Night Stalker cruises at an altitude of 50,000 feet. The plane's onboard thermal imaging system monitors movement throughout the compound. FBI Special Agent Danny Coulson.
You could see everything going on the ground. We saw CSA people standing and talking to each other in little groups around the compound. We could see every animal, every deer, every coyote, rabbits running around on the ground, which gave me a tremendous advantage because I could use this vehicle, this airplane, to help me set my perimeter. They could maneuver my people around listening posts. They could maneuver my people around patrols.
Coulson directs the mission from a command and control vehicle near the front gate of the compound. Special Agent Clint Van Zandt, an FBI hostage negotiator, advises Coulson.
It was very prudent to go in at night and to have them wake up the next morning and find that we had walked literally right up to them without them knowing it. We could have come all the way in, but we didn't do it because we want to resolve this peacefully.
HRT snipers surveil the compound from positions inside and near the main gate. Within 10 minutes, they report that 2 men are exiting the compound and approaching their position.
Sniper 1 to command post. Roger. Instructions, please. Have individuals coming out of the compound gate.
Stand by.
Standing by for instructions.
And I radioed back and said, do they know you're there? He said, no, they haven't seen us yet.
The sniper tells Coulson that one man has an assault rifle, the other has a sidearm.
Go back inside. Individuals getting closer, command post. Instructions, please.
Coulson instructs his men to confront the CSA guards.
I said, you hail them, you yell at them and tell them you're the FBI and tell them to go back inside.
You copy. Tell them to get back inside the compound.
The message it sends is that we could have got you, but we chose not to do it. Basically, we are here in force, but we come in peace.
FBI! Back in the compound, now! FBI, get back in the compound! Move! 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 Move!
One of them get in the habit of following my orders or the orders of my team, and to show them that we weren't there to hurt them.
We're hearing from the tactical agents that there are lights, that there are activities within the compound.
We'll go with you.
No, you better stay back here.
Moments later, another man walks out of the compound.
Who's out here?
I instructed them to let him get close, and I wanted 2 operators to take him into custody.
FBI, freeze! Don't move! Freeze!
I didn't order him back in because I wanted to start the dialogue. It's time to talk now. Sometimes one of the most difficult things about a standoff situation is finding somebody to talk to. You don't always get them to talk to initially.
The man identifies himself. He's Kerry Noble, the deputy commander of the CSA.
The first thing I said to him is we need to start a dialogue and talk about resolving this thing peacefully. We're not here to hurt anybody, but you're not getting out. And if you start a war, we're going to end it.
Noble says he will convey the FBI's request to talk with his commander. At daybreak, federal agents and local police have completely surrounded the compound. The news media somehow gets hold of the story and converges along access roads. Agents establish a direct telephone line into the compound. A short time later, Agent Coulson receives a call.
The operator called me over and said, it's him, and it was the leader.
Yellow. That's right, I'm in charge of it.
And essentially said the same thing that I'd said to his deputy, is that this is the FBI, my name is Danny Coulson, we have a warrant for your arrest.
And the only way that's going to happen...
The leader agrees to come out and talk on one condition:
Hold on a second.
that he will not be arrested. Otherwise, his people will put up a fight.
Okay.
Coulson agrees to the
got it.
terms.
5 minutes. I'll see you then.
Van Zandt prepares Coulson for the meeting. As an expert in behavioral science, Van Zandt believes the CSA leader will only respond to another commander.
As a military commander, I said, you wouldn't be carrying a long gun or rifle in this type of meeting, but you'd have your 9mm pistols. You'll meet his expectation as to what our FBI tactical commander should look like. He'll be more open to dialogue, more open to negotiations.
Coulson approaches the main gate.
You should always look like you're in charge. But also, you have to bring him out. You have to get him to talk. It's not just you walk up and give demands, you get him to talk to you.
Tensions mount for a possible violent confrontation. FBI snipers train their sights on the CSA leader and his guards.
And you have to understand that this is a man who thought we were literally from the devil, that we were agents of the devil. So trying to create a bond of trust on a road with 2 armies facing each other with awesome firepower is a difficult thing to do.
Coulson tells the CSA leader that the FBI is there to confiscate grenades, assault rifles, the law, anti-tank rocket, all illegal weapons stored in the compound.
And eventually...
I really didn't describe the forces. I just said, we're here, we've been here, we know what's going on in there, and at this point I wanted to remain the faceless enemy. What I got from him was dialogue, which is the most important thing. But what I didn't get was capitulation. He didn't agree to do anything. He just agreed that they would go back in and pray about it.
Well, I respect that.
We'd agreed earlier if he came out that he could go back in. And that's very important. You have to keep that trust.
Coulson and Van Zandt have no choice but to honor their agreement. They allow the leader to go back inside the compound. The first day and night of the siege passes without incident or resolution. On day 2 of the siege, the CSA commander requests another meeting. This time, he appears in full battle dress.
Changing clothing is a big deal. When the leader of CSA puts on tactical clothes, he's taking the presence of a tactical commander.
The leader of the CSA tells Colson that there are people inside the compound who are prepared to launch an assault and break out.
And my patience was wearing really thin by this time. And I said to him, who are you going to fight? You've not seen us. You don't know where we are. We are going to use deadly force on you if you come out with weapons and come onto my perimeter. Who are you going to shoot? You haven't even seen us yet. How are you going to shoot us? It's like you're fighting ghosts, and you won't even know who kills you. You need to come out of there.
Now you get in there and convince them to get out of here right now.
The leader tells Colson he is prepared to come out, but he can't control everyone in the compound.
And he said to me, I need help. He said, there's a man that's our spiritual leader, and I need his advice, and I need his help to convince people that's the thing to do to come out. And I said, who is this? He said, it's Robert Millar.
Robert Millar is a well-known figure in the secretive world of right-wing extremists. It's an unusual demand. But to Van Zandt, it's a turning point in the negotiation.
This situation was either going to be resolved by bullets or it was going to be resolved by trust. Bullets or trust, what's it going to be?
For Colson, it is the moment of truth. He knows that if the shooting starts, there is no telling when it will stop. In the mountains of Arkansas, over 200 law enforcement agents surround an armed compound. Inside are a group of violent right-wing extremists, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord. The leader of the CSA demands to see Robert Millar, their spiritual leader. FBI Special Agent Danny Colson decides to use Millar to help persuade CSA members to leave the compound.
This is something totally against FBI policy, to bring in a Confederate into a crisis situation, not just to negotiate, but to go inside. And this is a huge risk. And I thought it was worth taking, given the risk that we were facing.
The FBI flies Millar in from Oklahoma. Special Agent Clint Van Zandt tries to convince Millar that it will be in the group's best interests if he helps bring the standoff to an end.
I said, you know, if you're able to do this, if you're able to resolve this peacefully, you'll be known as the peacemaker within your movement. I said, I don't say that to win you over. I say to tell you that you've got a lot riding on this. And you could see the wheels turning. It was at that moment I thought, he's flipped over on our side. He's on our side. He's going to do it. This was all the chips. We're saying, we're going to bet on this guy that he's going to drive home the message that Danny and myself and everybody else has been delivering for the last 4 days. Now, he's got to close the deal.
What a mess out here it looks like.
And he called on the field phone. And Millar said, well, I'm in here talking to them, but I really haven't got anything resolved. I said, okay, you got another hour. Well, really, we couldn't control him. What were we going to do, go in and grab him by the neck and rip him out of that compound where there was 50 people with guns inside? So you had to be real careful of not, you will be out of there, because then it would have been apparent we were an empty suit. We were a paper tiger, and we couldn't be perceived as that. So it had to be, well, I really need you out of there in an hour. And he called back in an hour and he said, I need more time with these folks. I think I can do it. I've got them coming along, but I need more time. And we just reconciled ourselves that he's going to stay there the night.
On the morning of April 22nd, day 4 of the siege, Millar and the CSA leadership exit the compound. For the first time since the beginning of the standoff, there are no armed men with the CSA leader.
They came out and they said, we have an agreement that we will surrender. We will come out and we'll give up our arms and walk out peacefully.
Colson receives the news with guarded optimism.
And I said to them, that's a great decision, but I want you to understand that this better not be a ruse for an escape attempt, because you will not survive it. This better be a surrender.
Colson gives the leader 15 minutes to gather his people and bring them out.
And very shortly after, I get a communication from a sniper team that they're coming. They're coming out. The snipers report that they're in civilian attire. There's no camis, there's no battle gear, there's no weapons they can see.
The siege is over. Not a single shot has been fired.
It was an ending that we had all prayed for, and one that we were very fortunate that we had.
ATF and FBI agents carefully searched the compound, accompanied by the deputy commander of the CSA, Kerry Noble. Over the course of several days, they recover hundreds of automatic weapons, homemade hand grenades, and landmines, as well as detonator boxes and plastic explosives. Agents find a Law anti-tank rocket near the leader's house. They find 30 gallons of cyanide stored inside steel drums. Agents believe the CSA intended to use it to pollute municipal water supplies. Investigators also find a steel-plated armored car equipped with a fully automatic machine gun. At trial, the leader of the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord is sentenced to 20 years in prison for federal RICO violations. Kerry Noble, the CSA's deputy commander, receives a 5-year sentence for firearm violations. Today, he speaks publicly about the dangers of hate groups and destructive cults. Richard Wayne Snell, already serving a life sentence for the murder of Arkansas State Trooper Lewis Bryant, is found guilty of murdering a pawn shop owner. He is sentenced to death. On April 19, 1995, at 9:16 p.m., Snell is executed by lethal injection. Today, the CSA compound is little more than a collection of abandoned shacks and stone ruins. In southern Louisiana, a vicious killer is on the loose, slaughtering his victims in their own homes. The body count rises. Authorities struggle in their search for evidence. They resort to behavioral analysis, hoping to recognize a pattern that will help them identify a sadistic murderer.
In Louisiana, a brutal killer turned a rural area into his personal hunting ground. He preyed on the defenseless, the weak, and the elderly. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The killer would lie in wait, often striking while his victims slept. No one was safe, even in their own homes. Working with police, FBI profilers helped to identify a madman, to catch him before he could strike again.
Laplace, Louisiana, May 9th, 1997. At 9:46 a.m., James Lowell Jr., A deputy with the St. John's Parish Sheriff's Department stops by his parents' home. Lowell's sister had called him at work, concerned why their parents aren't answering their phone. The deputy discovers the front door is ajar.
Mom? Mom?
He finds his father, James Lowell Sr., on the floor.
Dad? Mom?
His face is covered with blood.
Dad? Mom?
He checks his father's pulse
Dad?
and finds none.
Mom? Mom?
He looks for his mother. He finds her in the kitchen, brutally assaulted. Anne Marie Lowell is unconscious and her pulse is faint, but she's alive.
Dispatch is low. Dispatch is low.
The deputy calls for an ambulance and backup.
My dad's dead. My mom's scared. We both. Send back her, please.
Within minutes, officers, detectives, and EMTs respond to the scene. The brutal attack shocks Detective Todd Himmel of the St. John Sheriff's Department.
This is a well-respected family in the community, well-known, good people. Most of our homicides are either drug-related or maybe an argument that escalated. To have a home invasion homicide is uncommon for this area. When I first made entry into the house, my first reaction was very gruesome. A tremendous amount of blood on the floor and the walls. The injuries to the victims were quite gruesome.
EMTs worked to stabilize Mrs. Lowell for the short trip to River Parish Hospital. Later that day, she dies from her injuries. Deputy Lowell tells investigators how he found his parents. He points out a pair of eyeglasses on the kitchen floor that belonged to his father. Investigators find a blood-stained hammer near Mr. Lowell's body. The nature of the wounds to the victim's head and face lead investigators to believe this is the weapon that killed him. The detectives search the house.
When I made entry into the den area and observed the female's glasses laying on the floor with some blood, it was obvious that she was struck in that area.
Investigators find a large sugarcane knife, sometimes called a side blade or sling blade.
It's covered in blood. It was obvious that it was a weapon that inflicted the injuries on the female victim.
Detectives noticed that several volumes of an encyclopedia have been thrown to the floor.
Blood spots. I'm finished over there. Okay. Ooh, did you see that?
Got money. That's $100 bill out there.
Checking the books still on the shelf, they find the Lowells had hidden nearly $12,000 there.
Just pile them up here.
Family members later confirmed the total. The intruder did not find any of the money. Investigators theorize the killer's search was interrupted.
He was very close to finding the money. Apparently he was scared before he was able to. The son coming home to check on his parents may have scared him off.
Crime scene technicians dust nearly every exposed surface in the house, but the only fingerprints they find match the victims or close family members.
Hey, Tony, come here. Did you get a couple of pictures of this?
Investigators search the exterior of the house. They discover the phone line, as well as the wires to the alarm, have been cut. And one of the garage windows has been removed.
We were able to determine point of entry, which is the side window. Apparently the suspect had enough time to actually take a knife and remove the putty from a pane of glass from the old wooden windows.
Detective Himmel suspects the killer took his time breaking into the Lowells' home.
The particular location that he had made entry into was camouflaged by a fence and some trees, so in essence, no one would have seen him if they were passing on the road, so he did have time to make entry and to actually whittle away the putty from that window pane before he made entry into the residence.
Investigators spread out to interview the Lowell's neighbors. Although LaPlace is a tight-knit community, nobody has noticed anything unusual. Detectives run background checks on everyone who has recently come in contact with the family. They discover that a handyman hired by the Lowells is an ex-convict. He spent 5 years in prison for manslaughter.
We began an investigation looking into his background. From that point, we kept him under constant surveillance.
3 days later, police bring the handyman in for questioning. He claims he is innocent, but a polygraph exam suggests he is being deceptive.
Anything?
Detectives obtain a warrant to search the suspect's home for clues. Crime technicians use luminol and black lights to hunt for blood evidence. Investigators theorize that the ex-con could have murdered the Lowells and quickly returned to his home. Once there, he inevitably would have deposited small amounts of blood. But their efforts turn up no evidence. Although detectives are unable to connect the suspect to the murders, they continue to keep him under surveillance. 5 days later, Detective Himmel arrives at the scene of a second brutal homicide. Another prominent member of the community has been murdered. Officers responding to a missing persons call discovered the body of 58-year-old Joyce Gilmer in the backyard of her home. According to her family, her car is missing. The victim has 4 bloody lacerations to the back of the head. Detective Himmel immediately suspects that this murder is related to the double homicide.
There were several similarities between the two. Namely, both victims were well known throughout the community, elderly. They either owned or had owned their own business at one point. The weapon of choice was a sharp-edged object.
Investigators now realize they can rule out the possibility that the ex-con is the killer.
He was under constant surveillance at the time that this crime had occurred, so we could eliminate him as being a suspect because we felt strongly that both crimes were related.
Detective Himmel walks through the house looking for signs of an intruder. He finds none until he gets to the master bedroom. It appears as if the killer knew exactly what he wanted. The victim's family reported a safe is missing.
The only room that was disturbed was the master bedroom closet where the safe was located, which indicated to us that the perpetrator knew exactly where to go and knew exactly what he was looking for when he went into the residence. And having knowledge of that, the safe existed inside that master bedroom, it's a good possibility he knew the victim, that it could be one reason that he did murder her is because she knew who he was and could identify him.
The investigators find no evidence of blood inside the house. They conclude that the victim was likely forced into the backyard, where she was murdered. Crime scene investigators process the house for evidence, including hair, fiber, and fingerprints. The killer has been careful. Once again, he has left nothing behind. Later that day, investigators find Mrs. Gilmer's car in the parking lot of a hotel just a few miles from her home. Deputies tow the vehicle to the sheriff's impound lot for analysis.
When the car was found, the keys were still in it, so it was obvious that he had used that area just to dump the vehicle and had gotten into another vehicle, which was either parked there previously or he was picked up by someone.
Crime technicians collect several fingerprints, but they only match the victim and members of the victim's family. For Detective Himmel, the car is another dead end.
We didn't have any physical evidence that could determine who the perpetrator was or even assist us in determining who the perpetrator was.
Investigators review videotapes taken by the hotel's security cameras. Unfortunately, the cameras were not focused on the area where the stolen vehicle was abandoned.
It was a very stressful, very tense moment, trying to determine who's responsible for these crimes, working 20 hours a day, getting 4 hours of sleep a night. It was quite stressful.
With limited resources and almost no evidence to go on, the St. John Sheriff's Department calls the New Orleans field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Detectives hope FBI profilers can help identify a vicious killer. Special Agent Dan Funk travels to the scenes of both homicides, starting with the Lowell murders. Investigators are still processing the home 2 weeks after the slayings.
Part of my job, being at the field, at the scene, is to provide all the information that the profiling unit at Quantico needs to do their work. They're not at the scene. I'm the local eyes and ears for that unit. What I do is go to the crime scene, try to absorb as much information as I can, and then provide it back to Quantico.
Agent Funk tries to determine step by step what happened the day of the murder.
I'm looking for pre-offense behavior, offense behavior, and post-offense behavior, which basically means what the subject and the victims did prior to the crime, during the crime, and then after the crime.
Small clues help the agent establish a timeline.
It appeared that the subject spent maybe the whole night in the garage waiting for the victims to wake up. We noticed that because the newspaper was picked up in the morning, and it was the victim's routine to immediately pick up the paper upon rising. And then it looked like there was coffee grounds in the garbage to indicate that they made coffee and were settling down for their morning routine before the attack occurred.
There's one that belongs in the garage.
According to the family, the murder weapon, a cane knife or sling blade, was kept in the garage with other tools. The killer had literally hacked Mrs. Lowell to death with a 40-inch blade that he found in her own garage.
You could see blood on the floor, blood splattered on the walls. You proceeded through the house, and wherever you looked, there was blood. You could just see marks on the walls and on door jambs where you could picture that the subject just swinging this wildly at the victim.
What are you doing? Leave me alone! Leave me alone, Carl!
This was probably the worst crime scene that I've ever seen. And it spread throughout the house, which indicated that there was just an ongoing confrontation between the victims and the subject that just went on and on.
With the discovery of Mrs. Lowell's eyeglasses in the den, investigators believe that was where the killer first encountered his victim. Since her body was located in the kitchen, investigators speculate she was chased there by the intruder. The discovery of Mr. Lowell's eyeglasses on the kitchen floor suggests a possible scenario.
To have Mr. Lowell's glasses in the kitchen, we believe that's the initial point of contact between him and the perpetrator.
Investigators theorize that Mr. Lowell entered the kitchen attempting to defend his wife, but they note his body was found in the hallway.
We believe he was either trying to get another weapon or trying to get to a phone that was in the hallway.
After viewing both the Lowell and Gilmer crime scenes, Agent Funk is confident he has enough information to take to Quantico.
We definitely believe that this was a case that the profiling unit could assist on. There was a lot of interaction between the victim and the subject, and there were a lot of activity that could be used to come up with an offender profile.
But could FBI profilers help identify the killer before he strikes again? In Louisiana, a killer has murdered 3 prominent citizens in a small town. He strikes with extreme violence, but leaves few clues. At FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, Special Agent Dan Funk and local investigators brief FBI profilers on the murders.
My partner, he's got the newest case that we're working.
The expert observes that the Lowell crime scene reflects a mixed behavior.
So it's a good two-handed weapon, very sharp. It's not worth anything.
The subject was organized in the burglaries, but disorganized in the murders. The subject brought tools with him to disable alarms and phone lines and to enter the residence, but he was disorganized once he entered it. He didn't bring a weapon with him, but he found weapons of opportunity located at the scene.
Profilers also note that careful planning gave way to extreme violence when the intruder confronted his victims. The brutality of the murders suggests a chaotic personality.
We've got some good stuff here, some good solid police
But the
work.
profiler tells St. John's investigators that he will not be able to create a profile powerful enough based on only 2 incidents.
Solid profile.
They need more data.
We can't just sit around and wait for.
What I am going to suggest is
The profiler's advice to the investigators is to go back and search through their cold case files to look for similar unsolved murders in nearby jurisdictions.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Investigators from St. John's Sheriff's Department meet with detectives from nearby parishes. The detectives share the details of their cold case files and make a chilling discovery. They find that over the last year, 3 unsolved homicides bear striking similarities to the Lowell and Gilmer murders. Records show that 8 months earlier, in nearby Ascension Parish, the owner of an auto repair shop was beaten to death with an aluminum baseball bat. A substantial amount of money was stolen from the victim's home.
He's in his late 50s. He owns an auto repair shop in my district. It happened about a year before your double murder.
5 months later, in St. James Parish, a 58-year-old woman was stabbed and beaten to death in her home. Police found a bloody knife in the sink. They were unable to recover any fingerprints from the weapon or at the scene.
They had a 58-year-old woman.
Less than 3 weeks later, also in Ascension Parish, a 71-year-old woman was beaten and stabbed to death in her bedroom. The victim was stabbed multiple times and bludgeoned with a trophy. Detectives found an open safe in a bedroom closet. The contents, value unknown, had been removed.
What was strange was she was found under an overturned couch.
Phone lines and alarm wires to the residence had been cut. Investigators conclude that as many as 6 homicides may have been committed by the same killer. But before the task force can ask the FBI to review the new data and create a more detailed profile, there is another attack. Shortly after 4 o'clock in the morning, on July 7th, 1997, detectives from the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Department arrive at the home of Vincent and Julie Rowland. A uniformed officer briefs Sergeant Detective Mike Toney.
The sheriff's office responded to the 911 call that we received. After the sheriff's office patrol division arrived at the residence, they learned that there was a home invasion. It was a brutal attack. It was a vicious attack upon 2 elderly people of the community.
Detective Toney learns the couple sustained severe lacerations and gunshot wounds. Miraculously, they are both alive. The next day, Toney visits the hospital and learns that both victims have been stabilized. The doctor tells investigators that dozens of .410 gauge shotgun pellets were removed from the face, neck, and chest areas of both victims. If the Rowlands had been struck by larger gauge ammunition, they might not have survived. Among his injuries, Mr. Rowland has a large knife wound and shotgun blast to his face.
It was remarkable that he was able to talk and give us information. He was determined to give this information because he wanted his attacker caught. And he gave a wealth of information as to how the attack took place.
The man tells investigators he and his wife were in bed, asleep.
It was around 2 or so in the morning. He was awakened when this large 30-pound rock was thrown upon his face. As he rises up out of the bed, the attacker starts hitting him in the facial area with the side blade. He tries to defend himself from the attack.
The man struck him with the sling blade over and over again. Mr. Rowland said he was ordered to open a safe that was in the bedroom closet. He told the man he couldn't open the safe because he was hurt too badly. He and his wife were forced into the bathroom.
The combination of the safe.
To buy time, he intentionally gave his attacker the wrong combination.
36, 4, 34. Wrong answer. That's not the combination.
He ordered Mrs. Rowland to open the safe or he would kill them both.
Go! 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 Open the safe. Let's go. You're taking forever. Open it up. Back up.
The safe contained over $100,000 in cash. After cleaning out the safe,
Stay there. I'll kill you.
the intruder moved to the opposite side of the house.
No, it's all right. Stay here. Stay here.
Oh.
Mr. Rowland could see him through the bathroom window.
All right. Stay there. No. Stay here. I'll take care of this.
He left the bathroom and went for the chest in the bedroom closet where he kept 2 guns. He hid behind the sofa and waited. He had taken the wrong revolver.
No.
The one he kept loaded was still in the closet. The intruder had found a shotgun in a gun cabinet.
No.
Mr. Rowland was hit in the face.
He laid there pretending to be dead, at which time he heard someone walk up to him, which he didn't realize it was his wife. He hears a second shot goes off, and then he realizes his wife has just been shot.
Mrs. Rowland tells investigators that she laid still until the intruder left. She then tried to call 911, but the phone line had been cut. Terrified and bleeding, she managed to drive to her son's house, where he called the police. Ascension Parish detectives share details of the Rowland statements with investigators. They are confident the attack is connected to the homicides they are investigating.
They were linked due to the type of home invasion it was. The perpetrator entered the residence through a window. Prior to opening the window, he had cut the phone wires to the residence, which would disable the alarm system. And then after entering the residence, seeking a weapon of opportunity, and then attacking the victims while they were in the house.
The detectives also note similarities in the killer's victims.
They were all elderly and owned businesses, and they were wealthy.
The Rowlands are the only people who have come face to face with this brutal killer and lived to tell about it. Investigators return to the hospital with a sketch artist who creates a composite drawing of the suspect based on the Rowlands' eyewitness description.
They described him as a white male with kind of shaggy-looking hair, thin, very authoritative voice. They described his voice as being of a person from the River Parish, from this area, as far as having a strong South Louisiana accent.
Investigators released the composite drawing of the assailant to the local news media. The wanted man is described as being a white male in his 20s or 30s, of average height with medium build and sandy blonde hair. Now, law enforcement from 3 Louisiana jurisdictions finally have their first lead in identifying a ruthless killer. An elderly Louisiana couple narrowly survives a brutal assault on their lives. Their attacker has been linked to 6 murders in 10 months. Now the suspected serial killer is on the loose with over $100,000 in cash.
Gentlemen, this will happen.
Armed with the survivors' statements, Louisiana investigators returned to Quantico, Virginia to present the newly linked cases to the FBI's profiling unit. The profilers agreed that the 6 homicides in the latest attack are most likely all connected. They suspect the killer lives or works in the area. He is nocturnal, and he may have recently purchased items he normally could not afford. The investigators now have a rough sketch of their suspect, but they need to move fast if they are to catch him. FBI Special Agent Dan Funk.
Now you had 2 live witnesses, subjects under pressure to believe that there's people out there who can identify him. So we believe that either he would change his appearance or he might even leave the area.
We've got several good...
The profilers recommend forming an official task force and asking the public to look out for anyone exhibiting any of the characteristics identified by the unit.
That's what we're going to recommend. We can do that.
The public appeal prompts thousands of phone calls to the task force hotline. A security guard from a local video poker casino provides an intriguing lead. He tells a detective that one of the regular customers at the casino looks a lot like the composite drawing he saw on TV. Detective Mike Toney of the Ascension Sheriff's Department.
He described the individual as a person who, before these attacks, would come in there and spend very little money. Poor dresser. Since the attacks, he would come in, he would spend a lot of money. He would then started sporting jewelry, riding a new motorcycle, basically changed his appearance.
But the security guard does not know the customer's name.
He gave a description of the person, what he looked like, as well as the vehicle that he was driven. And this vehicle was very unique. It was actually a truck, a large truck with a large boom on the back of it that was used to like lift motors and stuff and carry them around.
The detective reviews the security guard's recorded statement with the rest of the task force. His description of the customer's behavior is consistent with the profiler's analysis. Hearing the security guard's remarks about the customer's truck, a detective realizes he knows the man being described.
A pickup truck, it had a homemade hoist on the back of it.
The customer is an auto mechanic who once worked for a friend of his, the same man who had been beaten to death with a baseball bat in his home 6 months earlier. A murder linked to their suspect.
Yeah, there's a handful of them.
The mechanic's name is Daniel Blank. Blank is a former employee of an auto repair shop owned by the victim. He was one of 36 people police interviewed in connection with that crime. Although he had voluntarily given a statement to the police, detectives found nothing suspicious. A check of his record reveals one prior arrest for a minor theft in St. James Parish.
That's one side. Anybody want to go out and talk to him?
Investigators travel to Daniel Blank's last known residence to ask him some questions. A woman answers the door. She says she is the mother of Sonia Radford, Daniel Blank's girlfriend.
She advised us that Daniel Blank and his girlfriend had just moved to Texas, that he wasn't there. Left my information with her. If she would speak to him after we leave, would she give the information to him that we needed to talk to him?
Very important that he gets up with us. Okay, we greatly appreciate that. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
10 minutes after Detective Tony returns to his office, he receives a telephone call.
Detective Tony.
It is Daniel Blank.
Hey, listen, can I put you on hold just a second?
He says he is calling from Onalaska, Texas.
And while I'm on the phone with him, I advised him that we were investigating several homicides of elderly people. And from those homicides, a large amount of money was stolen from these people. And he just started being a wealth of information. He started talking about how he was gambling, that he was winning a lot of money, that he had all the receipts for his gambling winnings. And during the conversation, he tells me that he will be back in Louisiana within a few days. So it was set up where he would come and meet with us when he came back into Louisiana.
Okay, Daniel. Well, please call me as soon as you get back here, okay?
All right. Thank you. All right.
But Daniel Blank has no intention of returning to Louisiana. So investigators will have to go and find him. In Louisiana, authorities identify a suspect in a series of brutal murders. But as the investigation heats up, the suspect moves to a small town in the neighboring state of Texas. Federal agents in Louisiana contact Special Agent Rick Locke at the FBI's Lufkin, Texas resident agency. Agent Locke often works undercover, so his identity must be protected.
Anytime that there's a case that would involve the violent death of a number of people and the possibility of a serial killer on the loose, that would be moved to a #1 priority.
Agent Locke asks Lieutenant Detective Mike Nettles from the Polk County Sheriff's Department to locate and surveil Daniel Blank. Nettles searches local utility records and finds Blank living with his girlfriend, Sonia Radford, in a trailer park in Onalaska.
Once we identified him, then we started working on trying to build a case to see, was he spending a lot of money? Did he have a lot of money? Because we knew that there was a lot of money taken from some of the murder scenes in South Louisiana.
Good look at him.
Special Agent Locke and Detective Nettles keep the suspect under a close watch.
When we were conducting the surveillance of Blank, we did notice that he had purchased a vehicle since he had arrived in Texas. He had purchased a trailer home. He then leased a automobile repair shop business and opened a business known as Daniel's Automotive.
Public records reveal that Blank has leased the garage in his girlfriend's name. After surveilling Blank for nearly 2 weeks, Agent Locke and Deputy Nettles meet with the Louisiana Task Force and a Texas U.S. attorney. The investigators brief the prosecutor on the results of a financial background check on Daniel Blank.
He was spending a large amount of money, which fit the behavioral profile. After doing a financial background on him, we learned that in this year where he was spending all this money, he had no means of income that was showing up on his state employment records.
Tony, please.
During an earlier phone conversation with Blank, Detective Tony broached the subject of his income.
And that's when he started going into his gambling habits. All the money that I got, I won from gambling. So we had a person who was spending literally thousands of dollars at local gambling casinos. And then after doing the background and financial records through the casinos, we learned that he was actually spending more money than he was winning. So he was actually in a negative for his gambling records.
In addition to his massive gambling losses, Blank has purchased an SUV, a car, a new motorcycle, 2 trailer lots for $22,000, a $14,000 trailer, and a $4,000 above-ground swimming pool. Records reveal that most of the purchases were made with cash. The prosecutor agrees that the circumstantial evidence is impressive, but investigators have not produced any evidence that places Blank at any of the crime scenes or that connects him to a weapon. If investigators hope to make their case against Blank, they need hard, physical evidence. In Louisiana, technicians have recovered many latent fingerprints from the crime scenes. Analysts have matched most of the prints to the victims and their family members. Technicians compare the remaining unknown prints to a set of Daniel Blank's fingerprints, obtained during an arrest for an earlier minor violation. They determined that the prints do not match, but Blank's old record is incomplete. There are no palm prints in his file. And investigators have several palm prints from the crime scenes listed as unknown. The investigators devise a plan to obtain a set of palm prints from Daniel Blank. Through a records check, Detective Nettles and Agent Locke have learned that Blank does not have a valid driver's license. After weeks of surveillance, they have observed that Blank has a habit of running a particular stop sign near his business. The plan is for Nettles to perform a traffic stop the next time he does.
How you doing? Your driver's license registration? I don't have my license on me.
As predicted, Blank is unable to produce a valid driver's
My
license.
license expired.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and have to go down to the courthouse.
Is all this really necessary, you think?
Walk around the side of the car.
Yeah.
Nettles places him under arrest and takes him to the Polk County Sheriff's Office. During the booking process, officers take a full set of finger and palm prints from Blank. If the palm prints match the prints at any of the Louisiana crime scenes, investigators will have the evidence they need to obtain an indictment. Blank pays a $50 fine and is released. At the fingerprint lab, technicians compare the palm prints to latent prints collected at the crime scenes. In case after case, the results are negative. They do not match. All the prints collected at the crime scenes either belong to family members, victims, or remain unknown. So for now, suspected serial killer Daniel Blank will remain free. In Louisiana, 6 people are dead, the victims of a vicious killer. An intense investigation has revealed a prime suspect, but no hard evidence to tie him to the crimes. The suspect is volatile. Investigators have to get him off the streets. Now the only person who can provide the evidence they need is the suspect himself. FBI Special Agent Rick Locke.
It was decided that we must continue the case by planning for a detailed interview with Blank, as well as conducting a search of his properties. We were looking for any evidence which would definitely link him to the crimes in Louisiana.
Investigators served Daniel Blank with warrants to search his business and home. Detective Nettles asks Blank if he will come to the courthouse for a voluntary interview. He agrees. Blank is not arrested, but he is advised of his Miranda rights.
Do you mind if I record this conversation and
put it on video?
No, I
Have any problems with that?
No, go ahead.
Louisiana detectives Mike Toney and Todd Himmel conduct the critical interview.
A little bit about yourself.
It's a lot of pressure. You know that you either get a confession and solve these cases or you don't, and you have nothing.
Sure. Where are you from?
We had no physical evidence, and the circumstantial evidence wasn't that great to bring him to trial. We knew we needed a confession. We knew we needed him to tell us that he was responsible for killing these people. Without that, we had nothing. Our strategy was to first begin with background information with Daniel, asking questions that we knew the answer to. His family life, his education, his work background, that probably consumed an hour and a half. We then moved on to covering some of the homicides. The interview started to get interesting, I'd say probably within the third hour. At that point, we had challenged him on some of these homicides. We had asked him if he thought it odd that 2 of his former employers were deceased.
But I damn sure didn't kill him. I didn't kill him.
At that point, he became a little agitated. We were walking a fine line. We didn't want to upset him where he would walk out. He was not under arrest. He could have left at any moment.
But it wasn't me. I don't have
Blank continues to deny any involvement in the murders. It appears unlikely that he will confess to anything. Down the hall, investigators question Blank's girlfriend, Sonia Radford. She has also agreed to a voluntary interview.
Investigated several homicides.
It was entirely a consensual interview. She was free to leave. The interviewers approached her and asked if she would willingly visit with them in an interview room at the courthouse, and that was done. She did agree.
Sonia tells investigators she stayed out of Daniel's affairs, but she does admit he would often go out at night without telling her where he was going. Sonia also admits that a couple of times she dropped him off around the areas where the murders had been committed. Blank always told her he was going to repair someone's car. Sonia tells investigators she never wanted to believe Daniel was involved. A few doors down, Blank continues to deny any responsibility for the crimes.
I need you to go on record. I'd like you to take a polygraph, if that's okay with you.
He even agrees to take a polygraph exam.
Just answer yes or no.
I believe he agreed to take the polygraph because he needed to give the appearance that he was cooperative and that he wanted us to believe he was innocent.
The examiner asks Blank if he ever struck Mrs. Gilmer, the elderly woman found outside her home. Blank answers
no.
After 3 tests, the polygraph examiner reports that Blank is exhibiting deceptive behaviors. He is most likely not telling the truth. Blank is beginning to show signs of stress. His interrogators decide to further destabilize him by introducing an emotional subject, the recent death of his mother.
My father was no help.
I could tell that his relationship was close with his mother. From that point, I just discussed his upbringing. He came from a large family. I knew it wasn't easy for him because of the size of the family and both parents trying to provide food and support and housing for their children.
Daniel, did you love your mother?
Yeah.
If she were alive today and you were involved in these murders, do you think she'd want you to do the right thing?
Yeah.
Did you mean to kill Mrs. Gilmore?
No.
That was very important. That was the first admission that he had made that he was responsible for committing that crime.
Once Blank begins to confess, he doesn't stop. He ultimately admits to 6 homicides and 2 attempted murders. He tells Detective Himmel about his first murder, which occurred 8 months before the St. John's double homicide. Blank tells investigators he worked for the victim and claimed the man owed him money for a job he had done. He says he entered his boss's home and found him asleep on the couch. He tried to take his wallet, but the man woke up, Blank claims the man attacked him with a baseball bat. When he slipped and fell, Blank got a hold of the bat and started hitting back. He didn't stop beating the man until he was dead. Blank said he took $800 or $900 from the man's pockets.
I lost.
He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew the difference between right and wrong. And I believe after that first homicide, it just became easier and easier every time it occurred again.
In his confession, Blank consistently claims he acted in self-defense.
I shot them.
He insists that all 6 murder victims attacked him first.
So he was trying to kill you.
They were trying to kill me.
Blank's interpretation may be self-serving, but his memory of the crime scenes is nearly photographic.
The recollection was amazing. The amount of detail he was able to remember, being able to draw diagrams of the homes, draw diagrams of weapons that he used. His attention to detail was amazing.
The confession continues for 13 hours.
By the time he got to the end, he was very comfortable, drinking his soft drink, smoking a cigarette, very comfortable, nonchalantly discussing these crimes in detail.
Authorities in Texas arrest Daniel Blank on murder charges and then extradite him to Louisiana to face trial. Daniel Blank is convicted of 5 homicides and receives 3 life terms and 2 death sentences. He is currently on death row at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. The state of Louisiana decides not to pursue charges for the 6th homicide and attempted murders, confident that Daniel Blank will never leave this place alive.